From the outside, Jonathan Cole's life gleamed like a storybook fairy tale. A self-made millionaire in the heart of Manhattan, he graced glossy magazine covers, mingled with world leaders, and never missed a chance to flaunt his success. Yet behind the tall glass windows of his penthouse, tensions brewed. A secret text here, a guarded phone call there, and rumors whispered of a tangled affair that threatened to explode. Meanwhile, Alicia Cole, his pregnant wife, began to sense the cracks in her gilded cage. No one, least of all Jonathan, suspected how quickly a single online leak would unravel his carefully manicured world, ending his career in the span of one unforgettable night. Jonathan Cole's story was the stuff of modern legend. Born to middle-class parents in suburban New Jersey, he had clawed his way to a scholarship at Harvard Business School. There he'd rubbed shoulders with future magnates, forging alliances that would later propel him to the top of the finance world. By age 32, Jonathan had founded Cole Capital Ventures, a private equity firm that specialized in distressed real estate assets, buying low, selling high, and weaving magic in between. His good looks and suave charm made him a darling of the business press. Forbes ran a feature titled Young Titan, Jonathan Cole's meteoric rise, capturing him in a tailored navy suit against the panoramic backdrop of New York City. In the interview, he praised mentors such as Warren Buffett for teaching him patience and Bill Gates for demonstrating philanthropy on a global scale. The crowning moment, though, was his picture-shaking hands with Elon Musk after a speculative investment in aerospace startups. Jonathan glowed with the certainty that he was destined for greatness. It was at a fundraiser in Central Park that he first met Alicia Martinez. She was a non-profit consultant with a passion for arts education. Where Jonathan's approach to conversation was slick and polished, Alicia's was empathetic and earnest. He found her refusal to be dazzled by his reputation oddly refreshing. She was there to talk about underfunded public schools, not hedge funds or leveraged buyouts. By the end of that charity walk, Jonathan had her phone number, and she had a curious spark in her heart. In 2 short years, they were married. Alicia's parents, humble owners of a small bakery in Queens, couldn't believe their daughter was wedding a man so frequently mentioned in the Wall Street Journal. But to Alicia, Jonathan wasn't simply the millionaire. He was the person who showed up unannounced to volunteer at her community events, who wrote personal checks for after-school programs. Their wedding ceremony, held at a historic mansion overlooking the Hudson River, was a glamorous yet heartfelt affair. The tabloids brimmed with gushing coverage, Alicia radiant in lace, Jonathan dashing in a classic tuxedo, smiling as though they had discovered the secret to eternal happiness. At first, their union genuinely seemed magical. Jonathan declared that Alicia grounded him, tethered him to values he might have otherwise forgotten. She brought soul to his ambition. Life in the Cole penthouse sparkled with promise, lavish soirees for global dignitaries, altruistic ventures to build schools in underprivileged neighborhoods, and daily bursts of joy that only 2 people deeply in love could share. If only that bliss could have lasted. Life moved quickly in Jonathan's orbit. The success of Cole Capital Ventures brought new deals, new acquaintances, and inevitably new pressures. Over time, Alicia witnessed the subtle changes in her husband's routine. Invitations from the global elite poured in exclusive dinners with real estate mogul Mark Anderson, lunches at the Plaza with famed venture capitalist Lucy Goldstein, and hush-hush strategy sessions with foreign sovereign funds. While Alicia supported her husband's drive, she couldn't ignore the increasing cracks in his calendar or in his demeanor. He began coming home later, offering vague explanations about urgent meetings or unexpected negotiations. Alicia, ever understanding, reassured him that she respected his hustle. But then came the cancellations of their personal plans. A date to watch an off-Broadway show cancelled. A weekend getaway to the Hamptons postponed. Birthdays and family gatherings became second-tier priorities. The more she tried to reach him, the more she felt a certain emotional distance creeping in. Around the office, Jonathan was surrounded by loyalists and ladder climbers alike. One of them was David Lynn, his longtime friend from Harvard and now partner at Cole Capital. David had witnessed Jonathan's evolution firsthand. He noticed subtle changes too: Jonathan's sharper edge during conference calls, the tension behind his charismatic smile during business pitches. Yet David trusted that a man as resourceful as Jonathan always had it under control. Among the staff at Cole Capital Ventures was also the bright and ambitious Veronica King. A recent Wharton MBA graduate, Veronica had made waves by closing a multi-million-dollar investment in green technology within her first year at the firm. Her intelligence and striking beauty made her a conversation piece at every corporate event. Jonathan lauded her as the future face of finance, praising her for deals that posted triple returns. He found in Veronica a reflection of his younger self, hungry, driven, and fearless. Still, none suspected that an alliance far different than business was about to form. At this point, Alicia had no idea who Veronica King truly was. She saw her name in passing on annual reports. Occasionally, Jonathan would mention Veronica's accomplishments, praising her for innovative thinking. Alicia would nod and smile, impressed by this rising star. In Alicia's mind, she was grateful Jonathan had formidable professionals like Veronica on his team. She never once suspected that the very power he admired in his protégé might be forging a dangerous temptation beneath their polished corporate veneer. As Alicia's pregnancy crept into her second trimester, she began noticing odd details. The first warning sign was a perfume scent she didn't recognize lingering on Jonathan's coat. She asked him about it casually, and he brushed it off, probably from a handshake at some networking event. Another red flag was how he protected his phone like a prized artifact, always face down, always locked with a new passcode. Late at night, she'd hear the faint buzz of messages, see the subtle glow of his screen as he typed back in the dark. Each time, she tried to rationalize away her concerns. This was the man she loved, who donated millions to build libraries in underserved communities, who cried at the birth announcement, who once surprised her on a random Tuesday with her favorite pastries from her parents' bakery. Infidelity seemed unimaginable. Yet Alicia's heart churned with a subtle, gnawing dread. Life in the Cole penthouse had become increasingly solitary. Although Jonathan had promised to limit business travel during her pregnancy, his schedule remained as frenetic as ever. Singapore, Dubai, Paris. He was always on the go, chasing new mergers or expansions. He rarely spent more than a couple of nights at home. When he did, he was restless, glued to emails or brainstorming calls. Alicia began to feel that the only presence she could truly count on was the baby she carried. Friends from Alicia's old neighborhood in Queens reached out with concern. They missed her visits the way she used to pop in for coffee and conversation. He's just going through a busy phase, she'd reassure them. In a way, Alicia was trying to reassure herself too. Still, doubt grew every time she caught sight of that mysterious perfume, or saw a new bruise-like shadow under her husband's eyes from sleepless nights. Then Alicia found something chilling, a hotel receipt tucked in Jonathan's suitcase from a high-end resort in Turks and Caicos. The date overlapped with a weekend. He'd told her he was in Boston, closing a deal. She tried to confront him, but lost her nerve. Could she have misunderstood? Was it a courtesy booking for a client or staff? Her mind ran in circles, seeking a plausible explanation. Little did she know the truth was far more insidious. Veronica King was not the sort of woman who blended into the background. With ebony hair styled in a sleek bob, she carried herself with confident ease. By day, she dazzled boardrooms with crisp financial analyses, commanding respect from colleagues twice her age. By night, she appeared in social columns alongside Manhattan's elite, her emerald dress shimmering under paparazzi flashes. She was rumored to have grown up in modest circumstances, determined to break ceilings, no matter the cost. One evening, Alicia found herself accompanying Jonathan to a charity gala, hosted by the Metropolitan Museum of Art. Proceeds would benefit underfunded art programs in public schools, an event that aligned perfectly with Alicia's passion. Upon arriving, Alicia felt the old sparkle of excitement hobnobbing with notable figures like gallery owners, educators, and philanthropic entrepreneurs. A group of Jonathan's colleagues from Cole Capital Ventures greeted them, among whom was Veronica. This was their first real introduction. "Ah, the legend herself," Veronica said, with a radiant smile, extending her hand to Alicia. "Jonathan speaks so highly of you, and all the wonderful work you do with school kids." Alicia returned the greeting, struck by Veronica's grace. She was everything Alicia imagined a high-flying finance star, to be polished, assertive, exuding an air of subtle power. When Alicia mentioned her involvement in drafting new arts curricula, Veronica listened attentively, nodding as though she truly cared. The conversation was pleasant, even warm. Yet Alicia caught a flicker of something unspoken between Veronica and Jonathan, a shared glance that felt too intimate, too layered with private meaning. Throughout the gala, Alicia couldn't shake the sense that eyes were on them, as if the rest of the guests sensed an undercurrent. She told herself she was imagining it, that she was just hormonal and overthinking, but a tiny voice inside her whispered, "Veronica King is more important to Jonathan than you realize." By the evening's end, Alicia felt unsettled. Jonathan excused himself to take a call, just when Alicia was beginning to share her feelings about an educational campaign. Veronica also vanished into the throng of socialites. Alicia sipped her sparkling water in awkward solitude, noticing a faint swirl of that same unfamiliar perfume drifting through the air. After the gala, Alicia began piecing together subtle patterns. Jonathan had singled Veronica out in so many conversations, praising her as a strategic genius, marveling at her ability to close deals in weeks that took others months. In the past, Alicia had been proud whenever Jonathan mentored bright up-and-comers. Yet with Veronica, the tone of his praise sounded tinged with personal adoration. One morning, Alicia found herself with a free schedule and decided to surprise Jonathan at his office with homemade pastries, his favorite almond croissants from her parents' bakery. It was a gesture she used to do often, back when everything felt normal. Arriving unannounced, Alicia was greeted by the wide-eyed receptionist, who stumbled through a hello, as though not entirely sure how to handle her presence. She brushed it off and headed down the glass-walled corridor to Jonathan's corner office. Outside his door, Alicia froze. Through the partial opening, she heard lowered voices. Jonathan and Veronica seemed to be in the middle of a heated discussion, but not in an angry sense, more like an emotionally charged conversation. Alicia didn't want to eavesdrop, yet she couldn't will herself to move. Then she clearly heard Veronica say, "We'll figure this out, Jonathan. I'm not giving up on you." A brief silence followed, and then Jonathan's voice softer. "I know. Just not here." Alicia's heart hammered in her chest. She quickly retraced her steps and waited by the reception area, forcing a casual expression when Veronica exited the office moments later. Veronica paused in surprise upon seeing Alicia with the pastry box. "Oh, hi. I didn't know you'd be stopping by." Her voice carried an undercurrent of tension, though her face remained impeccably calm. Alicia's fingers clenched around the box as she managed a tight smile. Their brief exchange ended with Veronica slipping away in a swirl of designer perfume. Alicia approached Jonathan's office next. He greeted her with mild surprise and a forced grin. "Almond croissants, wow," he said, accepting the box. His eyes flicked to the door as if confirming Veronica was gone. Alicia asked if he was all right, and Jonathan dismissed it as office stress. The entire moment felt like a carefully choreographed dance with unspoken tensions swirling around them. That night, Alicia hardly slept, twisting the memory of Veronica's words over and over in her mind. "I'm not giving up on you." She remembered how intimate they sounded, like a promise between lovers rather than colleagues. Uncertainty blossomed, overshadowing even the joys of her pregnancy. She told herself she needed proof before leaping to conclusions that might destroy her marriage. Still, the seeds of suspicion had taken root, and the soil of her heart felt unbearably cold. Despite mounting worries, Alicia maintained her public smile as she accompanied Jonathan to another high-profile event, the annual City of Tomorrow Gala. Headlined by luminaries in real estate, tech, and philanthropy, it was a can't-miss affair for anyone jockeying for influence. Jonathan was especially eager to network with Tony McAllister, a legendary investor rumored to be launching a multi-billion-dollar fund. Alicia planned to share her vision for an educational project that integrated cutting-edge technology into underfunded schools, hoping to drum up philanthropic support. The venue was lavish, a 5-star hotel ballroom overlooking Central Park. Crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead, and violin music mingled with the hum of high-stakes conversation. Alicia wore a flowing cobalt gown, tailored to accommodate her growing baby bump. She felt both regal and uneasy, noting the stares from various acquaintances. She wondered if she was imagining the undertones of gossip in their voices when they greeted her. About an hour into the gala, Veronica King swept in, wearing a sequined emerald dress that seemed to catch every flicker of light. She joined Jonathan, who stood near a champagne fountain, exchanging pleasantries with Tony McAllister. Veronica's arrival sparked a shift in the air. Jonathan's posture straightened, and there was a palpable current of electricity as they spoke. Alicia approached, heart thudding. She joined the circle just in time to hear Jonathan praising Veronica. She single-handedly brought in an Indonesian sovereign fund for our latest project. Imagine what she'll do next year. Veronica laughed softly, thanking him, while shooting a quick, coded look in his direction. That fleeting glance felt like a secret confession. Tony McAllister then turned to Alicia, politely inquiring about her philanthropic interests. Seizing the opportunity, she shared her concept for bridging education gaps through advanced technology. Though Tony listened, Alicia sensed a general distraction in the group, as if her words were overshadowed by the silent drama swirling between Jonathan and Veronica. She pressed on regardless, determined to stand her ground. Partway through the evening, Alicia watched from across the ballroom as Jonathan and Veronica slipped out onto the balcony. Their silhouettes formed tense outlines in the moonlight. Alicia could almost feel the strain in their stances. When they returned, Jonathan was stone-faced, while Veronica looked tearful. The rest of the gala played out in a haze, Alicia's mind spinning with questions. Why was Jonathan risking such a public display if he truly had nothing to hide? On the ride home, Jonathan was silent. Alicia debated whether to confront him. Fear of the truth won out. She remained quiet, letting the hush fill the back seat like a suffocating blanket. One thing was certain: the veneer of their marriage was cracking fast. Weeks after the gala, Alicia woke one morning to a series of text messages from unknown numbers. Each one contained the same cryptic statement: "You deserve better. Check your emails." Shaken, she logged into her personal email account and found an anonymous note with an attachment. The note read, "He's not who you think he is. Trust me, I work with them. This has gone on too long. You should know." Hands trembling, Alicia opened the attachment. Her eyes widened at what she saw. Screenshots of phone call logs, countless late-night messages and photos from Veronica King, all addressed to Jonathan. Some were innocuous, referencing business deals, but others were clearly personal phrases like, "Missing you last night was unforgettable and can't wait until we're alone again," leaped off the screen. A wave of shock crashed over Alicia. She felt like she was floating outside her body, watching herself shatter. She reread the messages, searching for any plausible explanation besides the obvious. Perhaps they were fabricated, or maybe there was some context missing. Yet the depth and frequency of the conversations were undeniable. Jonathan had been carrying on a secret affair with Veronica, and someone inside Cole Capital or close to them had decided to expose it. Through her tears, Alicia tried to remain rational. She recognized some of the timestamps. They aligned perfectly with nights Jonathan claimed to be overseas or tied up in emergency meetings. Worse, there were photos of the two at a private beach, Veronica in a sun hat, Jonathan leaning into her with a tenderness Alicia once believed was reserved only for their marriage. The date stamps matched the weekend he was supposedly in Boston. Alicia doubled over as waves of nausea seized her, uncertain if it was morning sickness or heartbreak. She clutched her phone, tears splashing onto the screen. The anonymous tip had obliterated any chance of maintaining her illusions. Betrayal now stood naked before her, leaving no room for doubt. She scrolled through the messages again, feeling her grief transform into rage. She was pregnant with this man's child, while he gallivanted with another woman behind her back. Was this what their marriage was worth? In desperation, Alicia tried calling Jonathan. No answer. She left a trembling voice message. "We need to talk. Now." Then she buried her face in a pillow, sobbing until exhaustion closed her eyes. The world felt cruel, and she wondered if she had the strength to confront what came next. Jonathan returned home late that evening to find Alicia sitting on the living room couch, the glow of a single lamp illuminating her tear-streaked face. The instant he saw her reddened eyes, he knew something had changed. She said nothing at first, only holding out her phone. He glanced at the screen and visibly paled. Silent seconds stretched as he read through the texts and pictures. Alicia noticed the flicker of guilt crossing his face before he masked it with a forced calmness. "Where did you get these?" he asked, voice low. "Does it matter?" she replied. "They're real, aren't they?" He exhaled shakily, dropping into a seat across from her. "It's complicated. Veronica and I don't want excuses." Alicia's voice trembled with quiet fury. "I want to know how you could do this while I'm pregnant with your child." Jonathan looked away, unable to meet her gaze. It started as a mistake, Alicia. I was at a conference. We had too much to drink. That's not an excuse, she snapped. You lied to me for months. No years, given these time stamps. You made me doubt my own sanity. He tried to speak, but the words choked in his throat. Instead, tears brimmed in his eyes. Alicia found it almost pitiful. She had once adored this man, who seemed larger than life. Now he looked small, lost, and pathetic, snared in the aftermath of his own betrayal. Eventually, he confessed to an ongoing affair with Veronica. They had grown close while working on high-stakes deals. Their relationship escalated during out-of-town conferences, fueled by adrenaline and the thrill of secrecy. Jonathan insisted it was never about love, but about tension relief and escaping the pressures he faced at Cole Capital. His rationale shattered the last vestiges of Alicia's sympathy. She pointed to her baby bump. What about me? Your child. Did you ever think about the risk emotionally? Physically? Jonathan attempted an apology, but the words felt hollow. Alicia erupted pent-up fury, spilling out in a storm of accusations. She recounted every suspicious sign she'd overlooked, how she'd supported his career, how she had endured him missing prenatal appointments. Underneath her anger lay a deep sadness for the life she thought they were building, a life that Jonathan had so casually betrayed. By the time the confrontation ended, Alicia felt emotionally gutted. Jonathan slept in his study that night, if he slept at all. She stared at her bedroom ceiling, tears soaking her pillow, wrestling with how to move forward. The next morning, she awakened to the knowledge that her heartbreak was only beginning, and so was Jonathan's downfall. In the days following Alicia's discovery, Jonathan scrambled to patch up his personal and professional worlds. He promised Veronica he would handle the situation, but that Alicia would always be his priority. He reassured Alicia that he would end the affair immediately, that he would do whatever it took to save their marriage. However, Alicia watched his panic with an air of detachment. Her trust in him was already shattered. Then came the social media explosion. One Monday morning, a popular finance gossip blog, The Street Whisperer, posted a scathing article, Billionaire Jonathan Cole's Secret Affair, Exposed Exclusive Photos. The piece included leaked pictures of Jonathan and Veronica embracing in what appeared to be a private cabana at a tropical resort. The blog teased additional salacious details forthcoming. Within hours, major business news outlets like Bloomberg and CNBC picked up the story, albeit more cautiously. They framed it as a scandal-rocking Cole Capital Ventures. Stock forums buzzed with speculation about how this might affect Jonathan's leadership and the firm's reputation. On Twitter, finance influencers dissected the ethical implications, with some calling for Jonathan to step down. Jonathan's phone lit up with calls from board members, investors, and perplexed clients. Even Lucy Goldstein, who had once praised him for philanthropic endeavors, publicly condemned his distraction from the greater mission of ethical business. The timing was disastrous. He had been on the cusp of finalizing a massive investment partnership with Tony McAllister. Now everything was in jeopardy. Alicia, reading the news coverage with weary eyes, felt a surge of anger. She had never wanted a public scandal. She would have preferred a private reckoning. But now that the world knew, she felt oddly vindicated. No longer was she alone in suspecting Jonathan's duplicity. Everyone saw it. Even so, she worried about the toll this uproar might exact on her unborn child. Less than 24 hours later, a video surfaced of Jonathan and Veronica walking hand in hand through a hotel lobby in Paris, laughing as though they didn't have a care in the world. The date stamp revealed it was just 2 months prior, around the same time Alicia had told him about her pregnancy. Public outrage soared and investors panicked. Jonathan's carefully curated brand, self-made entrepreneur, philanthropic benefactor, devoted husband, was crumbling under a relentless digital onslaught. In the midst of the uproar, Alicia received a second anonymous email. This time it contained receipts of hush money, transfers from Jonathan's personal account to an offshore entity with references to Veronica's name. The sender wrote, "He's been paying to keep certain things quiet. Thought you should know." Alicia's heart pounded as she examined the evidence. It looked like Jonathan had been funneling funds, possibly to secure Veronica's silence or cooperation. The sum was staggering enough to fund a dozen scholarships or a new arts program in any given school. The revelation further corroded Alicia's hope that Jonathan could ever be the man she once believed him to be. She confronted him the following evening, brandishing printouts of the transactions. "You're bribing her now. Is this blackmail?" "Hush money." "What else have you been hiding?" Jonathan, cornered, admitted. He'd been trying to preempt any public scandal, fearing precisely what was happening now. Veronica wanted compensation for her efforts on certain deals, he claimed. She threatened to go to the competition, or worse, to the media. "I had to protect our company, our name." "Is this your idea of protection?" Alicia spat tears stinging her eyes. "Lying, paying people off, it's disgusting. You betrayed me, betrayed your own ethics if you ever had them." Jonathan's face twisted. "Don't say that. I messed up. But everything I did was to protect us, to keep the family intact." Alicia laughed bitterly, clutching her pregnant belly. "And how's that working out for you? The world knows now. You might lose everything. And me. I don't know if there's any us left to protect." She stormed out, leaving Jonathan staring at the damning documents. On the street, Alicia's mind whirled. She felt trapped, tied by marriage, soon to be tied by parenthood, yet confronted with the ultimate betrayal. The outside world offered no solace, either its eyes fixated on the spectacle of Jonathan's downfall. For a moment she wondered if leaving the city altogether would be the only way to save her sanity. But deep in her heart, Alicia knew she had to stand and face the storm, if not for herself, then for the child growing inside her. Within a week, Jonathan's scandal dominated the business news cycle. Forbes ran an op-ed titled "The Tragic Fall of Finance's Golden Boy," analyzing how personal irresponsibility could sink even the most profitable venture. Share prices for coal, Capital Ventures nosedived, rattling the firm's board of directors and raising alarms among major investors. Social media took an especially brutal stance. Under the hashtag #CoalCollapse, thousands commented on Jonathan's hypocrisy, calling him a poster child for toxic corporate culture. Alicia's name also trended, though more sympathetically. Strangers on the internet expressed solidarity for a pregnant wife betrayed on a global stage. Some urged her to take him for all he's worth, while others championed her as a potential advocate for women wronged by powerful men. Within Coal Capital's walls, tension soared. The workforce split into factions. Some remained loyal to Jonathan, believing the scandal was a personal matter that shouldn't overshadow his accomplishments. Others blamed him for tarnishing the company's name, an act of negligence that jeopardized everyone's jobs. David Lynn tried to calm internal chaos, but rumors circulated that half the board wanted Jonathan removed. Veronica, for her part, took a leave of absence, claiming stress from the public harassment. No one knew if she'd be back. Amid the chaos, Alicia found herself hounded by reporters camped outside the penthouse cameras and microphones at the ready. She refused to answer questions or open the door, feeling the walls close in on her. Her phone buzzed with calls from tabloids, offering huge sums for an exclusive interview. She declined them all. Journalists even visited her parents' bakery, peppering them with invasive questions. Her mother, Lucia, called Alicia in tears, apologizing for not knowing what to do. Alicia felt a wave of guilt. Her private tragedy had become a public spectacle, and those she loved were collateral damage. Deep inside, a new resolve formed. Alicia realized she had the power to shape her own narrative, rather than let the scandal swirl around her uncontested. She was the wronged party. She had a voice, and if she spoke, the world would listen. Whether that voice would bring healing or further destruction, she didn't yet know. But she was done sitting quietly, while Jonathan's duplicity overshadowed her entire life. During one sleepless night, Alicia stared at old photos on her phone. Her and Jonathan beaming at their wedding, her reading to children at the community center, him unveiling a giant check for a local library. The happy memories contrasted so sharply with the heartbreak she now endured. She felt betrayed not just by Jonathan, but by the entire facade of perfection they once presented. At some point, she scrolled through messages of support from friends, even strangers on social media. People urged her to fight to stand up for herself and her unborn baby. She mulled over the idea of making a public statement, something to reclaim her dignity, but also to call out Jonathan's actions without stooping to sensationalism. Her phone pinged with a text from an unknown number. "I'm sorry for what you're going through. If you need a platform to share your side, we have your back." Signed, Anna Brooks, women's advocate today. Alicia recognized the name Anna Brooks as a well-known journalist and feminist advocate. Anna's open letters had previously brought attention to issues like wage gaps and domestic abuse. The text felt genuine, a rare sign of compassion in a media landscape that often thrived on sensationalism. Alicia's heart pounded. Could she trust Anna to handle her story ethically? The next morning, Alicia called Anna. Their conversation lasted almost an hour. Anna listened without interruption, as Alicia spoke of her heartbreak, her isolation, and her fears for her future. She clarified that her aim wasn't to harm Jonathan's career out of spite, but to stand up for her own life and child. Anna offered to arrange a press conference, a controlled environment where Alicia could present her perspective. No tabloid spin, no paparazzi ambush. Alicia agreed, though the decision left her trembling with anticipation and dread. That afternoon, Alicia met with a lawyer who specialized in marital law. She wanted to understand her rights, especially with a baby on the way. While part of her considered divorce, another part still grappled with the love she'd once felt for Jonathan. The lawyer recommended caution, explaining how a public statement might influence settlement negotiations or custody issues. Alicia nodded gravely, fully aware that once she spoke publicly, there would be no going back. In just a few days, Anna Brooks secured a small event space in Midtown, not far from Times Square. The press invite was circulated discreetly among reputable journalists and media outlets. The announcement was simple: Alicia Cole, wife of Jonathan Cole, to make a statement regarding recent events. Despite the short notice, the event attracted major attention. Producers from major networks like CNN, MSNBC, and even BBC reached out, eager to broadcast the story of a betrayed wife taking a stand against her millionaire husband. Anna Brooks handled logistics, ensuring Alicia would have privacy to arrive and depart without being mobbed by cameras. In the background, Alicia's lawyer hovered uneasy about how the press conference might affect legal proceedings. Still, Alicia was resolute. This was her narrative to tell. On the eve of the press conference, Alicia worked on her statement in a quiet corner of her parents' bakery, inhaling the comforting scent of fresh bread. Her mother brought her a warm mug of chamomile tea, gently stroking her daughter's hair. "You'll do what's right," Lucia whispered, eyes filled with motherly concern. Alicia's phone buzzed with a text from Jonathan. "Please don't do this. We can fix it privately. Think of our child." She stared at the words, bitterness surging. She typed back, "It's too late for that. You should have thought of our child before you betrayed us." Then she turned off her phone, refocusing on the words she planned to read before the world. Inside her, a swirl of emotions raged: heartbreak, anger, but also an underlying sense of empowerment. She was no longer the supportive wife in the background of Jonathan's success story. She was stepping forward, pregnant and wounded, but ready to claim her truth. Whatever happened next, she promised herself she would be honest, not just for herself, but for all the women who had reached out, telling her to be strong. A brisk wind blew through Manhattan on the morning of Alicia's press conference. Cameras were already set up by the time she arrived, escorted by Anna Brooks. The modest venue could seat about 100 reporters, but more were spilling out the door, forming a crowd on the sidewalk. A hush fell as Alicia stepped onto the small stage, her baby bump subtly outlined beneath a black wrap dress. Anna stood beside her like a protective shield. Flashes lit the room. Alicia took a deep breath, heart pounding so loudly she feared the microphone would pick it up. She glanced at her note cards, then at the sea of expectant faces. She began, voice trembling at first. "Good morning. My name is Alicia Cole, and I'm here to speak about the scandal involving my husband, Jonathan Cole, and his affair with Veronica King. For weeks now, I've watched as this story has been told by tabloids, blogs, and the rumor mill. Today, I want to present the truth from my perspective." She paused, letting the weight of her words settle. "I have been married to Jonathan for 3 years, and we are expecting a child. I believed in him, stood by him, built a life with him. But I recently discovered, along with the rest of the world, that he was engaged in an extramarital relationship. I have read the same articles, seen the same images. They are devastating, especially given my pregnancy." Cameras clicked incessantly, capturing every flicker of emotion on her face. Alicia continued, her voice growing steadier. "I do not share this to invite pity or to be a pawn in a public spectacle. I share it because women mothers deserve the truth when it comes to the integrity of the men we marry. And because I believe accountability matters, whether you're a private individual or a public figure who touts ethical leadership." She then revealed Jonathan's attempts to cover up the affair, even referencing hush money documents. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Alicia clarified, "I stand here not to destroy Jonathan Cole, but to claim my future and the future of my child free from deception. I believe marriage is a partnership built on trust, and once that trust is broken so thoroughly, we must face the reality of what remains." With tears brimming, Alicia concluded, "I'm asking for privacy and respect as I decide the next steps for my family. I'm grateful for the outpouring of support. My hope is that by speaking my truth, I can begin healing and perhaps encourage others facing similar betrayal to do the same." She stepped back from the podium, a trembling hush sweeping the room. Cameras zoomed in on her tear-streaked face as Anna guided her away. The press conference had lasted less than 10 minutes, but it was enough to ignite a media firestorm that would shake Jonathan Cole's empire to its core. The press conference footage went viral within hours, dominating TV headlines and flooding social media timelines. Clips of Alicia's trembling yet resolute voice played on a loop. Hashtags like #AliciaCole and #Truth for Women trended globally. Celebrity talk show hosts weighed in praising her bravery. Prominent women's advocacy groups hailed Alicia as a hero for publicly confronting the betrayal. Jonathan Cole, meanwhile, faced an immediate backlash. Investors who had hesitated to sever ties earlier now flocked away from Cole Capital Ventures in droves, unwilling to align themselves with a leader so publicly indicted by his own wife. The firm's stock plummeted further. A joint venture with Tony McAllister was placed on indefinite hold. In a statement to the press, Tony cited concerns about leadership ethics and stability. Inside Cole Capital, the board of directors convened an emergency meeting. The consensus was grim. Jonathan's personal scandal had become a public relations nightmare. A formal vote of no confidence was scheduled for the following week to decide his future at the company he'd built from scratch. Some long-time allies still defended him, claiming that personal issues shouldn't overshadow professional achievements, but they were outnumbered by those pointing to the spiraling finances and brand damage. Jonathan retreated to the penthouse, blinds drawn, refusing to comment publicly. Even Veronica King was nowhere to be found, rumored to be on an extended stay in London. For Alicia, the whirlwind of support and media attention felt surreal. Every time she logged online, she saw strangers praising her courage, dissecting her press conference, or labeling Jonathan a monster. She had never wanted to be the face of a movement, but she felt a growing sense of responsibility to use the platform fate had handed her. In private, she grappled with heartbreak and anxiety about the future. She had awakened in a gilded cage, her wealthy lifestyle now overshadowed by betrayal. Yet the press conference had sparked something new, a sense of agency. For the first time since discovering Jonathan's affair, she could breathe freely, certain she was controlling her own path. And that path would soon demand another step, deciding whether to stay in the marriage or proceed with a legal separation. At Cole Capital Ventures, the board of directors convened the crucial vote. The meeting room had never felt so tense. David Lynn sat at one end of the table, his face grim. Over half the chairs were occupied by men and women who once revered Jonathan as a visionary. Now they stared at financial projections, plummeting into the red, accompanied by slideshow images of negative media headlines referencing the Cole scandal. The intangible toll, public distrust, moral outrage, was just as damaging. Jonathan, face pale and eyes rimmed with exhaustion, delivered a desperate plea. He promised to rectify the situation, citing therapy crisis management strategies and a vow to refocus on the firm's core mission. "I've made mistakes," he admitted hoarsely. "But our track record of delivering value can't be overlooked. We are bigger than one scandal. We can still thrive if we stay united." Some board members shifted uncomfortably. A few, including David Lynn, tried to salvage the conversation, arguing for a temporary leave of absence instead of outright dismissal. But the majority believed drastic action was required to restore credibility. A hush blanketed the room as the members cast their anonymous votes. When the tallies were read, the verdict was clear. Jonathan Cole was removed as CEO, effective immediately. Tremors of shock rippled through the halls. Cole Capital employees, once starry-eyed by Jonathan's leadership, watched him clear his office with a mix of pity and muted anger. A caretaker CEO was appointed to stabilize the ship, focusing on damage control. David Lynn glanced at Jonathan with a sorrowful expression as security escorted him out. "I'm sorry, man," David whispered. "I tried to fight for you." Jonathan nodded wordlessly, clutching a box of personal belongings. By evening, business publications around the world proclaimed Cole Capital ousts founder amid scandal. Jonathan's reign was officially over. The man who once soared across the financial stratosphere was now unemployed, disgraced, and teetering on the edge of complete ruin. Jonathan's life unspooled in disarray. With no office to report to, he holed up in the penthouse, ignoring calls from journalists. He occasionally ventured out in sunglasses and a baseball cap, only to be ambushed by paparazzi. Online comments labeled him a cautionary tale of greed and infidelity. Some articles even suggested the affair had been an open secret among New York's finance circles, fueling new levels of scrutiny. Personal finances also took a hit. Jonathan's sudden exit from Cole Capital triggered contractual penalties. He faced possible breach of contract lawsuits tied to deals he'd spearheaded but failed to close. Frozen lines of credit cancelled invitations to VIP events. His social and financial power dwindled. Amid his downward spiral, Jonathan tried repeatedly to contact Alicia, leaving voicemails and handwritten notes. He apologized profusely, claiming he was ready to do anything to salvage their relationship. "I'll go to counseling, sign post-nups. Anything you want. One note." Read. But Alicia remained resolute, focusing instead on her own well-being and that of her unborn child. The final blow came when Alicia's press conference was replayed in a prime-time special with a commentary panel dissecting Jonathan's betrayal. The segment ended with a heartfelt interview of Alicia by Anna Brooks, highlighting Alicia's philanthropic ambitions. Footage showed Alicia visiting an after-school program, receiving cheers from children who recognized her from news coverage. In that moment, the camera panned to Alicia's determined face, capturing her transformation from betrayed spouse to empowered advocate. Jonathan watched the segment alone, a half-finished bottle of scotch by his side. He saw how the public now regarded Alicia with admiration, a stark contrast to his own vilification. In a moment of clarity, he realized he was witnessing the rise of a woman who had once stood quietly beside him, someone he'd taken for granted. Shattered by regret, he continued drinking until the lights of the penthouse blurred into darkness. While Jonathan sank deeper, Alicia was busy forging a new path. Through Anna Brooks's media connections and her own philanthropic background, she organized a fundraiser for underprivileged schools. The event was set to be a smaller, more authentic affair than the high-gloss galas Jonathan once frequented. The proceeds would go toward bridging the digital divide in low-income neighborhoods, an initiative Alicia had championed long before the scandal. As the date approached, Alicia found herself gaining supporters from unexpected places. Tony McAllister, once interested in partnering with Jonathan, reached out privately. He expressed admiration for Alicia's courage and inquired if she'd accept a donation from his philanthropic foundation. She graciously agreed, grateful for the unwavering backing. Others in the business world, previously enthralled by Jonathan, now saw Alicia as an emerging figure with moral authority. Invitations to speak at leadership panels trickled in ironically, offering her the spotlight once promised to her husband. Meanwhile, Alicia took steps to secure her future. Working with a lawyer, she prepared for a potential divorce filing. She also met with a financial advisor, ensuring she understood the complexities of Jonathan's assets and any marital entitlements. Each step felt daunting, yet liberating, as she realized she no longer had to abide by the illusions of a perfect marriage. In a surprising twist, David Lynn approached Alicia discreetly. He apologized on behalf of Cole Capital, acknowledging that many within the firm admired her. "We know Jonathan's downfall was his own doing," David admitted. "We'd like to work with you in some capacity, maybe an advisory role on the philanthropic side." Alicia hesitated, uncertain about maintaining ties to an institution so entangled with Jonathan's betrayal. Still, she considered the possibility of effecting positive change from within. Days turned into weeks as Alicia balanced philanthropic planning, potential legal battles, and the emotional toll of pregnancy. Through it all, she maintained her composure, fueled by a sense of purpose. While part of her still grieved the betrayal, she also recognized a budding strength. Her identity was no longer solely Mrs. Jonathan Cole. She was Alicia Cole, a force in her own right. One brisk afternoon, as Alicia returned to her parents' bakery for a quiet meeting with donors, she found Jonathan waiting near the doorway, slumped against a lamppost. He appeared disheveled, unshaven eyes bloodshot, wearing a crumpled blazer. The sight startled her, stirring both pity and residual anger. "Please," he said, voice strained. "Just a moment of your time." She considered walking past him, but compassion nudged her to pause. She let him follow her inside, where they settled at a back table amid the comforting aroma of fresh pastries. Lucia glanced over worriedly from the counter, but respected her daughter's privacy. Jonathan exhaled shakily. "I've lost everything, my job, my reputation. I can't lose you too. I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but I'm begging you to give me another chance." Alicia felt tears prick her eyes, though she kept her composure. "Another chance to do what? You've lied to me, cheated on me, humiliated me publicly." He pressed a trembling hand to his forehead. "I know. I was an idiot. I was greedy, arrogant. The money, the power, it consumed me. Veronica was just a symptom of my own weaknesses." "That doesn't erase what you did," Alicia murmured. "It doesn't take back the night you were with her while I lay at home, excited to share baby news with you. It doesn't undo all the heartbreak." Jonathan lowered his head, tears slipping down his cheeks. Alicia recognized genuine remorse in his eyes, but she also knew it might be too late. "If you need me to sign anything," he whispered, "custody agreements, child support, I'll do it. I just want to be part of the baby's life." The request struck a chord deep within Alicia. Their child deserved a father, but was Jonathan capable of the responsibility? She wrestled with conflicting emotions, the memory of happier times, and the fresh sting of betrayal. Finally, she said, "I can't make that decision right now. I need time. But this much is clear. You have to deal with the consequences of what you've done on your own." Jonathan nodded, head bowed in defeat. Before leaving, he offered a small envelope. "In case you want to reach me. That's my new number." Then he slipped out into the cold afternoon, a broken man, still clinging to a shred of hope. In the following weeks, Alicia immersed herself in planning her fundraiser, channeling her emotions into a cause that symbolized new beginnings. The event space was modest, a converted art gallery in Brooklyn, yet the atmosphere radiated warmth. Donors included local business owners, educators, and some philanthropic heavyweights. Alicia opened the evening by sharing her own story, not focusing on the scandal, but on the importance of forging a brighter future for the next generation. The fundraiser turned into a soaring success, raising more funds than Alicia had anticipated. Attendees praised her vision, and media coverage highlighted her commitment to positive change, contrasting starkly with Jonathan's tarnished reputation. Standing at the podium, Alicia felt a rush of empowerment. As she thanked the crowd, her hand drifted to her baby bump. She realized that in building a better world for others, she was also building a better world for her child. Not long after, Alicia filed for legal separation, citing irreconcilable differences. The move was symbolic as much as legal, a declaration that she was no longer tethered to Jonathan's fate. Public interest in the scandal waned, replaced by fresh headlines as the news cycle moved on. Life was still challenging, but Alicia awoke each morning with a renewed sense of purpose, surrounded by supportive friends and family. As for Jonathan, rumors suggested he had entered therapy and was considering launching a smaller financial consultancy if he could find backers. Some whispered that he was volunteering at a youth center, seeking to rediscover the philanthropic spark that once defined him. Whether these rumors were genuine or just strategic, Alicia didn't know. Occasionally she thought about letting him be involved with the child, but she needed reassurance that he had truly changed. Alicia's belly grew, and so did her resolve. She had discovered her voice in the midst of betrayal, learning that her worth wasn't measured by a man's success or the illusions they spun together. The conclusion of this saga was not a bitter end, but rather the blossoming of her independence. She carried with her the lessons of heartbreak, the joy of impending motherhood, and a determination to rise above any scandal that dared to overshadow her future. The downfall of Jonathan Cole and the rise of Alicia Cole stand as a testament to life's unpredictable turns. A single leak online dragged a powerhouse billionaire into ruin, yet it also became a spark for his pregnant wife to find her voice, her mission, and her freedom. Betrayal can devastate, but it can also illuminate truths we've long buried. Alicia transformed her heartbreak into a crusade for better opportunities, showing that even in the darkest moments, we have the power to rebuild and sometimes shine brighter than ever before. If this story moved, you don't let it end here. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more real-life drama and compelling narratives. Your support helps us continue bringing stories of resilience, empowerment, and the triumph of the human spirit. Stay tuned for our next riveting tale, because when one door closes, another door swings open, often revealing a whole new world of possibilities. Meanwhile, Alicia Cole, his pregnant wife, began to sense the cracks in her gilded cage. No one, least of all Jonathan, suspected how quickly a single online leak would unravel his carefully manicured world, ending his career in the span of one unforgettable night. Jonathan Cole's story was the stuff of modern legend. Born to middle-class parents in suburban New Jersey, he had clawed his way to a scholarship at Harvard Business School. There he'd rubbed shoulders with future magnates, forging alliances that would later propel him to the top of the finance world. By age 32, Jonathan had founded Cole Capital Ventures, a private equity firm that specialized in distressed real estate assets, buying low, selling high, and weaving magic in between. His good looks and suave charm made him a darling of the business press. Forbes ran a feature titled Young Titan, Jonathan Cole's meteoric rise, capturing him in a tailored navy suit against the panoramic backdrop of New York City. In the interview, he praised mentors such as Warren Buffett for teaching him patience and Bill Gates for demonstrating philanthropy on a global scale. The crowning moment, though, was his picture-shaking hands with Elon Musk after a speculative investment in aerospace startups. Jonathan glowed with the certainty that he was destined for greatness. It was at a fundraiser in Central Park that he first met Alicia Martinez. She was a non-profit consultant with a passion for arts education. Where Jonathan's approach to conversation was slick and polished, Alicia's was empathetic and earnest. He found her refusal to be dazzled by his reputation oddly refreshing. She was there to talk about underfunded public schools, not hedge funds or leveraged buyouts. By the end of that charity walk, Jonathan had her phone number, and she had a curious spark in her heart. In 2 short years, they were married. Alicia's parents, humble owners of a small bakery in Queens, couldn't believe their daughter was wedding a man so frequently mentioned in the Wall Street Journal. But to Alicia, Jonathan wasn't simply the millionaire. He was the person who showed up unannounced to volunteer at her community events, who wrote personal checks for after-school programs. Their wedding ceremony, held at a historic mansion overlooking the Hudson River, was a glamorous yet heartfelt affair. The tabloids brimmed with gushing coverage, Alicia radiant in lace, Jonathan dashing in a classic tuxedo, smiling as though they had discovered the secret to eternal happiness. At first, their union genuinely seemed magical. Jonathan declared that Alicia grounded him, tethered him to values he might have otherwise forgotten. She brought soul to his ambition. Life in the Cole penthouse sparkled with promise, lavish soirees for global dignitaries, altruistic ventures to build schools in underprivileged neighborhoods, and daily bursts of joy that only two people deeply in love could share. If only that bliss could have lasted. Life moved quickly in Jonathan's orbit. The success of Cole Capital Ventures brought new deals, new acquaintances, and inevitably new pressures. Over time, Alicia witnessed the subtle changes in her husband's routine. Invitations from the global elite poured in exclusive dinners with real estate mogul Mark Anderson, lunches at the Plaza with famed venture capitalist Lucy Goldstein, and hush-hush strategy sessions with foreign sovereign funds. While Alicia supported her husband's drive, she couldn't ignore the increasing cracks in his calendar or in his demeanor. He began coming home later, offering vague explanations about urgent meetings or unexpected negotiations. Alicia, ever understanding, reassured him that she respected his hustle. But then came the cancellations of their personal plans. A date to watch an off-Broadway show cancelled. A weekend getaway to the Hamptons postponed. Birthdays and family gatherings became second-tier priorities. The more she tried to reach him, the more she felt a certain emotional distance creeping in. Around the office, Jonathan was surrounded by loyalists and ladder climbers alike. One of them was David Lynn, his longtime friend from Harvard, and now partner at Cole Capital. David had witnessed Jonathan's evolution firsthand. He noticed subtle changes too: Jonathan's sharper edge during conference calls, the tension behind his charismatic smile during business pitches. Yet David trusted that a man as resourceful as Jonathan always had it under control. Among the staff at Cole Capital Ventures was also the bright and ambitious Veronica King. A recent Wharton MBA graduate, Veronica had made waves by closing a multi-million-dollar investment in green technology within her first year at the firm. Her intelligence and striking beauty made her a conversation piece at every corporate event. Jonathan lauded her as the future face of finance, praising her for deals that posted triple returns. He found in Veronica a reflection of his younger self, hungry, driven, and fearless. Still, none suspected that an alliance far different than business was about to form. At this point, Alicia had no idea who Veronica King truly was. She saw her name in passing on annual reports. Occasionally, Jonathan would mention Veronica's accomplishments, praising her for innovative thinking. Alicia would nod and smile, impressed by this rising star. In Alicia's mind, she was grateful Jonathan had formidable professionals like Veronica on his team. She never once suspected that the very power he admired in his protégé might be forging a dangerous temptation beneath their polished corporate veneer. As Alicia's pregnancy crept into her second trimester, she began noticing odd details. The first warning sign was a perfume scent she didn't recognize lingering on Jonathan's coat. She asked him about it casually, and he brushed it off, probably from a handshake at some networking event. Another red flag was how he protected his phone like a prized artifact, always face down, always locked with a new passcode. Late at night, she'd hear the faint buzz of messages, see the subtle glow of his screen as he typed back in the dark. Each time, she tried to rationalize away her concerns. This was the man she loved, who donated millions to build libraries in underserved communities, who cried at the birth announcement, who once surprised her on a random Tuesday with her favorite pastries from her parents' bakery. Infidelity seemed unimaginable. Yet Alicia's heart churned with a subtle, gnawing dread. Life in the Cole penthouse had become increasingly solitary. Although Jonathan had promised to limit business travel during her pregnancy, his schedule remained as frenetic as ever. Singapore, Dubai, Paris. He was always on the go, chasing new mergers or expansions. He rarely spent more than a couple of nights at home. When he did, he was restless, glued to emails or brainstorming calls. Alicia began to feel that the only presence she could truly count on was the baby she carried. Friends from Alicia's old neighborhood in Queens reached out with concern. They missed her visits the way she used to pop in for coffee and conversation. He's just going through a busy phase, she'd reassure them. In a way, Alicia was trying to reassure herself too. Still, doubt grew every time she caught sight of that mysterious perfume, or saw a new bruise-like shadow under her husband's eyes from sleepless nights. Then Alicia found something chilling, a hotel receipt tucked in Jonathan's suitcase from a high-end resort in Turks and Caicos. The date overlapped with a weekend he'd told her he was in Boston, closing a deal. She tried to confront him, but lost her nerve. Could she have misunderstood? Was it a courtesy booking for a client or staff? Her mind ran in circles, seeking a plausible explanation. Little did she know the truth was far more insidious. Veronica King was not the sort of woman who blended into the background. With ebony hair styled in a sleek bob, she carried herself with confident ease. By day, she dazzled boardrooms with crisp financial analyses, commanding respect from colleagues twice her age. By night, she appeared in social columns alongside Manhattan's elite, her emerald dress shimmering under paparazzi flashes. She was rumored to have grown up in modest circumstances, determined to break ceilings, no matter the cost. One evening, Alicia found herself accompanying Jonathan to a charity gala, hosted by the Metropolitan Museum of Art. Proceeds would benefit underfunded art programs in public schools, an event that aligned perfectly with Alicia's passion. Upon arriving, Alicia felt the old sparkle of excitement hobnobbing with notable figures like gallery owners, educators, and philanthropic entrepreneurs. A group of Jonathan's colleagues from Cole Capital Ventures greeted them, among whom was Veronica. This was their first real introduction. "Ah, the legend herself," Veronica said, with a radiant smile, extending her hand to Alicia. "Jonathan speaks so highly of you, and all the wonderful work you do with school kids." Alicia returned the greeting, struck by Veronica's grace. She was everything Alicia imagined a high-flying finance star, to be polished, assertive, exuding an air of subtle power. When Alicia mentioned her involvement in drafting new arts curricula, Veronica listened attentively, nodding as though she truly cared. The conversation was pleasant, even warm. Yet Alicia caught a flicker of something unspoken between Veronica and Jonathan, a shared glance that felt too intimate, too layered with private meaning. Throughout the gala, Alicia couldn't shake the sense that eyes were on them, as if the rest of the guests sensed an undercurrent. She told herself she was imagining it, that she was just hormonal and overthinking, but a tiny voice inside her whispered, "Veronica King is more important to Jonathan than you realize. By the evening's end, Alicia felt unsettled. Jonathan excused himself to take a call just when Alicia was beginning to share her feelings about an educational campaign. Veronica also vanished into the throng of socialites. Alicia sipped her sparkling water in awkward solitude, noticing a faint swirl of that same unfamiliar perfume drifting through the air. After the gala, Alicia began piecing together subtle patterns. Jonathan had singled Veronica out in so many conversations, praising her as a strategic genius, marveling at her ability to close deals in weeks that took others months. In the past, Alicia had been proud whenever Jonathan mentored bright up-and-comers. Yet with Veronica, the tone of his praise sounded tinged with personal adoration. One morning, Alicia found herself with a free schedule and decided to surprise Jonathan at his office with homemade pastries, his favorite almond croissants from her parents' bakery. It was a gesture she used to do often, back when everything felt normal. Arriving unannounced, Alicia was greeted by the wide-eyed receptionist, who stumbled through a hello, as though not entirely sure how to handle her presence. She brushed it off and headed down the glass-walled corridor to Jonathan's corner office. Outside his door, Alicia froze. Through the partial opening, she heard lowered voices. Jonathan and Veronica seemed to be in the middle of a heated discussion, but not in an angry sense, more like an emotionally charged conversation. Alicia didn't want to eavesdrop, yet she couldn't will herself to move. Then she clearly heard Veronica say, "We'll figure this out, Jonathan. I'm not giving up on you." A brief silence followed, and then Jonathan's voice, softer. "I know. Just not here." Alicia's heart hammered in her chest. She quickly retraced her steps and waited by the reception area, forcing a casual expression when Veronica exited the office moments later. Veronica paused in surprise upon seeing Alicia with the pastry box. "Oh, hi. I didn't know you'd be stopping by." Her voice carried an undercurrent of tension, though her face remained impeccably calm. Alicia's fingers clenched around the box as she managed a tight smile. Their brief exchange ended with Veronica slipping away in a swirl of designer perfume. Alicia approached Jonathan's office next. He greeted her with mild surprise and a forced grin. "Almond croissants, wow," he said, accepting the box. His eyes flicked to the door, as if confirming Veronica was gone. Alicia asked if he was all right, and Jonathan dismissed it as office stress. The entire moment felt like a carefully choreographed dance, with unspoken tensions swirling around them. That night, Alicia hardly slept, twisting the memory of Veronica's words over and over in her mind. "I'm not giving up on you." She remembered how intimate they sounded, like a promise between lovers rather than colleagues. Uncertainty blossomed, overshadowing even the joys of her pregnancy. She told herself she needed proof before leaping to conclusions that might destroy her marriage. Still, the seeds of suspicion had taken root, and the soil of her heart felt unbearably cold. Despite mounting worries, Alicia maintained her public smile as she accompanied Jonathan to another high-profile event, the annual City of Tomorrow Gala. Headlined by luminaries in real estate, tech, and philanthropy, it was a can't-miss affair for anyone jockeying for influence. Jonathan was especially eager to network with Tony McAllister, a legendary investor rumored to be launching a multi-billion-dollar fund. Alicia planned to share her vision for an educational project that integrated cutting-edge technology into underfunded schools, hoping to drum up philanthropic support. The venue was lavish, a 5-star hotel ballroom overlooking Central Park. Crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead, and violin music mingled with the hum of high-stakes conversation. Alicia wore a flowing cobalt gown, tailored to accommodate her growing baby bump. She felt both regal and uneasy, noting the stares from various acquaintances. She wondered if she was imagining the undertones of gossip in their voices when they greeted her. About an hour into the gala, Veronica King swept in, wearing a sequined emerald dress that seemed to catch every flicker of light. She joined Jonathan, who stood near a champagne fountain, exchanging pleasantries with Tony McAllister. Veronica's arrival sparked a shift in the air. Jonathan's posture straightened, and there was a palpable current of electricity as they spoke. Alicia approached, heart thudding. She joined the circle just in time to hear Jonathan praising Veronica. She single-handedly brought in an Indonesian sovereign fund for our latest project. Imagine what she'll do next year. Veronica laughed softly, thanking him, while shooting a quick, coded look in his direction. That fleeting glance felt like a secret confession. Tony McAllister then turned to Alicia, politely inquiring about her philanthropic interests. Seizing the opportunity, she shared her concept for bridging education gaps through advanced technology. Though Tony listened, Alicia sensed a general distraction in the group, as if her words were overshadowed by the silent drama swirling between Jonathan and Veronica. She pressed on regardless, determined to stand her ground. On a frosty Christmas Eve, just as the world around them sparkled with holiday lights and promise, Nicholas Hamilton walked out of his penthouse door, leaving his pregnant wife Eliza devastated and alone. In a single hour, her world shattered. Little did she know that by morning, her face would be on every news channel across the country. What happened that night would send shockwaves through the media, and their once loving marriage, revealing a labyrinth of hidden secrets, half-truths, and alliances so dark that even Nick, the man at the heart of it all, never imagined they'd see the light of day. Nicholas Hamilton was born into a life most people only dream about. His father, Charles Hamilton III, ran a prestigious financial conglomerate, Hamilton Global Holdings, with connections to old Wall Street families and foreign royalty. His mother, Beatrice Hamilton, came from a line of art collectors in Europe. By the time Nick was 5, he had already visited more countries than the average person would see in a lifetime. Summers were spent at a private villa in Lake Como, winters at a family estate in Switzerland. His friends joked that Hamilton was synonymous with privilege. But with privilege often came the expectation of perfection. Nick was groomed to follow in the Hamilton lineage from a young age, finishing top of his class at Phillips Exeter Academy, then breezing through Harvard with a degree in economics. He was brilliant, daring, and undeniably charismatic. Investors found him charming at 23. Board members found him wise beyond his years at 24. By the time he was 27, Nick had garnered his first Fortune magazine cover for youngest hedge fund prodigy to make $1 billion. He basked in it. He reveled in the accolades in the press and in the power he held over markets. Yet behind the carefully tailored suits and the opulent parties like the annual Hamilton Charity Ball at the Plaza, Nick carried a hollowness he could never quite shake. The constant pressure to outdo himself, to exceed the lofty bar set by his parents, and the relentless scrutiny of the media weighed on him like an anchor. And then came Eliza. Eliza Jordan was the kind of woman no one would ever guess would end up with a billionaire. She hailed from a modest background in upstate New York, her parents running a small diner famous for its apple pie. Eliza grew up working behind the counter, greeting travelers off Interstate 90 and listening to their stories. She developed an open, warm demeanor and an empathetic heart. After college, she dreamed of moving to Manhattan and becoming an investigative journalist. She idolized Christiane Amanpour and Anderson Cooper, determined to make her mark. But big breaks are hard to come by. She spent months pitching stories to local stations, blogging on the side, and occasionally freelancing for small publications. Her first real job in the city, ironically, had nothing to do with journalism. She became a research assistant for a non-profit legal firm investigating corporate malfeasance. One grey November afternoon, she found herself in the middle of a high-profile press conference. A whistleblower was about to expose an executive's dubious dealings, and the press had gathered in droves. It was there that Eliza first crossed paths with Nick Hamilton. He wasn't implicated in the scandal. In fact, his philanthropic foundation was partially funding the non-profit she worked for. He arrived impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit, carrying an air of confidence that made every head turn. Eliza, holding a thick binder of legal documents, nearly bumped into him as she rushed to hand over some last-minute notes to her boss. "Careful," Nick said gently as papers flew everywhere. "We wouldn't want to compromise your hard work." She looked up, cheeks flushing. I'm so sorry," Nick knelt, helping her collect the documents. Their eyes locked for only a second, but in that moment, the thrumming chaos of the press conference faded to a dull roar. Nick Hamilton, with all his grandeur, was kneeling on the floor, picking up papers for a woman he'd never met. He smirked. "Looks like you're the only person here more anxious than I am." Eliza laughed, nerves loosening. "This is my first big press event. I'd hate to drop the ball." When Nick handed her the final stack of papers, their fingertips grazed. In that fleeting touch, Eliza felt something shift within her. For Nick, it was as if he'd found something honest in a world too often painted in shades of pretense. Their relationship blossomed faster than either expected. Nick was used to women who were impressed by his money, who saw him as a golden ticket to an elite lifestyle. He'd grown wary of that brand of attention. But Eliza was different, warm, unpretentious, and passionately curious about the world. She was initially skeptical. Men like Nick often wore masks. But after a few dinners, early morning coffees near her modest apartment in Queens, and a few philanthropic events they attended together, she realized how genuine his empathy was. When Nick talked about philanthropic projects like funding medical clinics in rural Peru, Eliza's eyes lit up. She asked deeper questions about the people his foundation served, the cultures, and the structural problems that led to inequality. Nick found himself confiding in her. He spoke of the pressure his family placed on him, the exhaustion that came from constantly performing, constantly being the perfect Hamilton heir. Eliza listened, never judging, never rushing to offer hollow solutions. She made him feel seen, not as the billionaire mogul, but as a flawed human being who just wanted to find meaning. Slowly, their weekends became getaways from the crowded Manhattan scene to quiet corners of the Adirondacks. Nick taught her to ski, she taught him how to cook basic meals, and they binge-watched documentaries about journalism heroes. Despite coming from different worlds, they fit perfectly, each rounding out the other's vulnerabilities. One spring evening, 6 months after their first meeting, Nick proposed. It wasn't at some grand gala or a glamorous trip to Paris. He did it in her tiny kitchen in Queens Flower, dusting his cufflinks because they'd just attempted to bake a pizza from scratch. Eliza cried tears of joy, whispering yes through her sobs. The wedding was a whirlwind. The Hamilton name demanded a level of pomp and ceremony. The tabloids ate up every detail. Eliza initially wanted a small, simple affair, but Nick's parents insisted on hosting it at the Hamilton family estate in Greenwich, Connecticut, a sprawling manor that had hosted senators, tech moguls, and even European nobility on occasion. A sea of paparazzi camped outside the estate gates, hoping to snap photos of the commoner bride, who had captured the heart of the heir. Celebrity friends of the Hamiltons attended, including business magnates like Bill Gates and well-known figures like Oprah Winfrey, who happened to admire the Hamilton Foundation's philanthropic efforts. Even Elon Musk was rumored to have sent a personal note of congratulations, referencing a conversation he'd had with Nick about future humanitarian projects on Mars, half joke, half serious in Musk's typical fashion. Eliza felt swept away by the spectacle. As she walked down the aisle, it was hard not to be overwhelmed by the cameras and the crowd. Still, when she locked eyes with Nick at the altar, everything else fell away. In that moment, it was just them. They kissed amid applause, and the newly christened Mrs. Eliza Hamilton tried not to think about the mountain of expectations that came with her new last name. The first year of marriage was blissful, filled with philanthropic trips and adjusting to a new home, a luxurious but surprisingly cozy penthouse overlooking Central Park. Eliza settled into the role of philanthropic advisor, working with Nick's foundation to evaluate projects and travel to underfunded communities. Yet beneath the veneer of happiness, tension brewed. Nick's father, Charles Hamilton III, had never fully embraced Eliza. Though he was polite, there was an undercurrent of disapproval in every question he asked about her background, her career aspirations, her ability to handle the social demands of being a Hamilton. Beatrice Hamilton was more welcoming, but she too had her reservations, always measuring Eliza against an invisible, impossibly high standard. The tabloids didn't help. They followed Eliza relentlessly, scouring her small-town past for anything unsavory. They spun half-truths into headlines like "Small-Town Girl in Over Her Head" and "Hamilton Bride Ambition" or "Love." Nick tried to shield her, but every magazine cover was another reminder that her every move was being dissected. Despite these pressures, Nick and Eliza tried to keep their relationship strong. They'd have weekly date nights away from prying eyes, sometimes sneaking into a hole-in-the-wall restaurant in the Bronx, other times strolling through Riverside Park, disguised in baseball caps. But as Nick's responsibilities at Hamilton Global Holdings grew, so did the demands on his time. Late-night strategy sessions, flights to Hong Kong, endless phone calls with investors. Eliza found herself alone in a penthouse full of staff. She barely knew her attempts at philanthropic projects, overshadowed by the press's fascination with her personal life. After 2 years of navigating high society philanthropic travels and the unrelenting scrutiny of the media, Eliza discovered she was pregnant. She told Nick early one morning, surprising him with a tiny pair of baby booties she'd bought at a local boutique. Nick's face lit up. He scooped her into his arms, promising to scale back his work to be a present, loving father. For a while, Nick tried to make good on that promise. He turned down some late-night meetings, delegated more tasks to his trusted friend and CFO Joshua Pierce. Eliza, radiant and hopeful, started imagining their future as a family. She even pictured moving to a quieter brownstone in Brooklyn, where a child could grow up with parks and a sense of neighborhood. Then reality intruded. A major deal was brewing at Hamilton Global Holdings, one that involved a merger with a European bank partially owned by a Middle Eastern sovereign fund. It was complicated, volatile, and could catapult the Hamilton Empire into a new stratosphere if handled correctly. Charles Hamilton III insisted Nick oversee negotiations personally. Nick's calendar filled once again. Eliza tried to be understanding, but each day she felt more like a bystander than a wife. When she brought up her concerns, Nick would reassure her. "Just a little longer, Eliza. After this, we'll take that long vacation to the Maldives, away from everything." Still, The baby grew inside her, and with it a gnawing uncertainty about their direction. As December arrived, New York transformed into a wonderland of sparkling lights and holiday cheer. The Hamilton family was expected to spend Christmas Eve at the Connecticut estate. Eliza, now nearly 7 months pregnant, wanted nothing more than a cozy celebration with Nick, her parents who planned to drive down from upstate and maybe a few close friends. But the Hamiltons had a tradition, a lavish Christmas Eve ball that served as a fundraiser for their foundation. Politicians, celebrities, and Fortune 500 CEOs were all on the invite list. Charles and Beatrice pressed for Eliza to attend to show that the future mother of the Hamilton heir supported the family's philanthropic legacy. Nick was torn. On the one hand, he knew Eliza was exhausted physically and emotionally. On the other, the ball was a chance to seal deals and glean more support for the upcoming merger. He assured her it would be less formal than usual, that she could just make a brief appearance, wave hello, and retire early. Eliza reluctantly agreed. She chose a simple emerald gown that accentuated her baby bump, hoping to avoid the flamboyance that usually came with Hamilton events. The stage was set for a night that would change everything. On Christmas Eve, the Hamilton estate bustled with staff in black uniforms, preparing canapes and setting tables with fine china. A string quartet played softly, while guests arrived in limousines and expensive cars. The media lingered beyond the tall iron gates, waiting for glimpses of the glamorous soiree. Eliza arrived with Nick stepping out of their Bentley to the pop of flash photography. Nick placed a protective hand on her back, guiding her inside. The mansion was festooned with glittering Christmas trees, each meticulously decorated in a different holiday theme. Inside the who's who of society mingled CEOs from Fortune 500 companies, foreign dignitaries, and celebrities. Eliza felt the subtle glances at her growing belly, heard the whispered remarks about the next Hamilton generation. She tried to keep her head up, reminding herself it was for a good cause. Nick left her side to speak with a group of European bankers. Eliza found herself adrift, heading to the open terrace for some fresh air. There she found Joshua Pierce, Nick's longtime friend and CFO, sipping a glass of champagne. "Josh," she greeted him. "Nick is working again, I see." He offered a sympathetic smile. "I tried to convince him to dial it down for tonight, but you know how he is, especially with the merger negotiations at such a delicate stage." Eliza's shoulders sagged. "I just wish we could have one night of normalcy." Before Joshua could respond, a hush fell over the terrace. Charles Hamilton III emerged with a small entourage. He beckoned Eliza closer. "We need you and Nick inside for a photo with the board members. It's important for the Hamilton image." Fighting the urge to roll her eyes, Eliza followed. She stood by Nick, plastering on a polite smile, while cameras flashed. Beyond the lenses, she spotted her parents looking overwhelmed and somewhat lost among the crowd. Her heart ached. She wanted to go to them to share a moment of normal Christmas cheer. But in an instant, Nick was pulled away again, this time by a group of donors from Dubai. Eliza was about to follow when a sudden wave of dizziness overtook her. She hadn't eaten much all day, and her pregnancy made her more prone to fatigue. She steadied herself on a nearby chair, blinking away black spots. Just then she heard it, a muffled but heated argument emanating from behind one of the closed doors leading to Charles Hamilton's study. She recognized Nick's voice, tense and furious. Another voice retorted, "Charles Hamilton." Against her better judgment, Eliza moved closer to the door. She heard fragments. "Not your puppet, the legacy bad time. The baby. My decision. Each snippet ratcheted up her alarm. Suddenly the door swung open. Nick stood there, face flushed, eyes wild with anger. His father was behind him, cold rage emanating from his typically composed features. Nick's gaze flicked to Eliza. "We're leaving," he said, voice trembling. He grabbed her hand and stormed through the corridor out of the mansion, ignoring the startled glances of guests. Eliza followed, stumbling in her heels, her pregnant belly making swift movement awkward. Outside, their Bentley driver scrambled to open the door, but Nick waved him off. He pressed a button on his key fob, and the car's engine roared to life. They sped off the estate grounds, Christmas lights receding in the rearview mirror. For several minutes, Nick said nothing, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. Eliza finally mustered the courage to ask Nick what happened. He exhaled a shaky breath. I can't keep doing this. My father is pushing me toward decisions that threaten everything I've built. He wants me to sacrifice our personal life for the good of the Hamilton name. It's always about the legacy. Always. Eliza swallowed. But what does that mean for us? Nick glanced at her eyes darting from her belly to her face. I don't know anymore. They drove in silence back to the penthouse. Nick barely spoke as they entered their lavish penthouse. Christmas decorations twinkled in the foyer, gold ornaments on a towering tree, wreaths on marble pillars, and the faint scent of cinnamon from scented candles. It felt eerily disconnected from the tension swirling in the air. Eliza tried to confront him gently. Nick, talk to me. He turned abruptly, his eyes filled with a turmoil she had never seen before. I can't. God, Eliza, everything is caving in on me. The merger my father's demands the board. And now the baby. Her heart clenched. What do you mean, and now the baby? We both wanted this child. He raked a hand through his hair. Yes, I did. I do. But everything is crashing down all at once. My father is threatening to revoke my position if I don't follow his plan. The press is hounding us. I can't breathe, Eliza. Tears welled in her eyes. So what, you're going to run away from me? From us? He paced across the marble floor. I need space. I can't think straight. I've never felt so trapped. A wave of pain, not physical, but emotional, coursed through her. She lowered herself onto a sofa, trying not to sob. I'm 7 months pregnant, and you're talking about needing space, Nick. We're supposed to be a team. He grabbed his coat and keys. I'm sorry, he whispered, but I can't be here tonight. I just need to clear my head. Panic seized her. Nick, it's Christmas Eve. Nick's expression was torn, but his voice was resolute. I'll call you tomorrow. I promise. I need this. And before she could say another word, he walked out of the penthouse. The door closed with a heavy thud that echoed through the silent rooms. Eliza found herself alone, disbelief turning to shock. She sat there staring at the Christmas tree lights, flickering like distant stars. The baby moved inside her belly, a cruel reminder that she was not alone, but also a reminder that her husband had just left her on Christmas Eve. She tried calling him, no answer. She tried texting, no response. Christmas carols played softly on the home's integrated speaker system, an unwanted soundtrack to her heartbreak. She thought about calling her parents, but she couldn't bear to ruin their night. They were still at the Hamilton estate, likely feeling out of place. She didn't want them driving back in the dark on icy roads, just because of Nick's meltdown. Eliza paced the penthouse terrace, streaking her cheeks, until exhaustion took over in the early hours of the morning. She finally fell into a fitful sleep, the TV in the living room still glowing with late-night talk shows and replays of holiday specials. When Eliza woke around dawn, a sense of dread still clung to her tormentor. She padded into the living room, searching for any sign of Nick's return. The sofa was empty, the penthouse silent. Feeling restless, she turned on the news. Initially, it was just background noise, holiday segments, weather reports, traffic updates. Then something caught her eye on the ticker at the bottom of the screen. Breaking Hamilton family drama. Her stomach tightened. She turned up the volume. The anchor spoke in a grave tone. In an unexpected twist. This Christmas morning, shocking events have unfolded around the Hamilton family empire. Reports indicate that Nicholas Hamilton, heir to Hamilton Global Holdings, has left his pregnant wife, Eliza Hamilton, and is currently unaccounted for. We have unconfirmed details suggesting a possible connection to the highly anticipated European merger. Stay tuned. Eliza's mouth went dry. Her phone began to vibrate with incoming calls and texts. She switched to another channel, the same story, more speculation. A photo of her taken at the Christmas Eve ball filled the screen. The words, "Where is Nicholas Hamilton?" scrawled beneath. Panic consumed her. Why was the media reporting this so quickly? Why were they implicating her in the same breath as the merger? She attempted to call Nick again, straight to voicemail. Within minutes, the doorman of her building called up. "Mrs. Hamilton, we have half a dozen reporters in the lobby. They want a statement. Shall I call security?" Eliza's heart pounded. She felt cornered, confused. She had no idea what was happening or why it was happening so fast. All she knew was that her husband had walked out on Christmas Eve, and now the world seemed to know and wanted answers. She needed help. In a panic, she dialed Joshua Pierce. His line rang 4 times before he answered in a groggy voice. "Eliza, what time is it?" She explained the situation, voice trembling. "The news channels are talking about me, about Nick, and about some scandal with the merger. Josh." "I'm scared," he cursed under his breath. "I just woke up to a flurry of messages too. Listen, I'll come over. Don't say anything to the press until I get there. Keep your doors locked. If Nick calls, let me know." Within half an hour, Joshua arrived looking as rattled as she felt. He wore a hastily thrown-on sweater and jeans, not his usual immaculate suit. Outside, Eliza could see camera crews gathering on the sidewalk. "I've been trying to reach Nick too," Joshua said, after hugging her gently. "No luck. This rumor about him disappearing and leaving you on Christmas Eve, well, it's half true, I guess. The media's spinning it as a meltdown tied to the merger. They're also claiming you might have threatened to expose some of Hamilton Global's internal dealings." Eliza's eyes widened. "What? That's absurd. I've never done anything like that." Joshua grimaced. "I know, but gossip feeds on confusion. People smell blood in the water. Charles Hamilton must be in damage control mode. They probably want you to keep quiet." She felt a fresh wave of anger and hurt. Nick promised he'd come back. Now he's not answering. And I'm the one under the microscope. "Let's see if we can get to the bottom of this," Joshua said, pulling out his laptop. "We'll try to contact the Hamilton PR team, figure out the real story." Over the next several hours, the media frenzy intensified. Shots of Eliza's face from the night before, a tearful expression as she left the estate, were plastered on news networks and gossip websites. Speculation ran wild. Did Nick leave because he feared fatherhood? Were there financial irregularities about to be exposed? Was Eliza blackmailing the Hamiltons? The speculation about blackmail stung the most. Eliza had never sought money or influence from Nick. She'd always tried to be independent, even after marrying into wealth. As the day wore on, Joshua managed to speak with the Hamilton PR director. He relayed their statement to Eliza. They're denying all blackmail rumors, but they're also not clarifying why Nick left. They just say he's taking personal time. They want you to do the same and to avoid contact with the media. Eliza shook her head in disbelief. How can they leave me hanging like this? I'm the one left alone on Christmas, and they want me to go silent. Joshua patted her shoulder. I don't like it either. But they're probably scared. This merger is huge, and any sign of instability might kill the deal. She pressed a hand to her baby bump, feeling a reassuring kick. What about me? What if something happens? This stress can't be good for the baby. His eyes softened. I know. That's why I'm here. We'll figure out a way to protect you. Maybe you should reach out to your parents. Have them come here. Eliza nodded, tears threatening again. Yes. I need them right now. Later that afternoon, while Joshua took calls in another room, Eliza scrolled through her phone. She noticed an email with the subject line, "You need to see this." The sender was unknown, a cryptic address. She opened it hesitantly. Attached was a PDF labeled Hamilton Merger Confidential. Her heart raced. She tapped it, revealing pages of financial documents, email transcripts, and legal correspondences. It looked like evidence of wrongdoing internal communications that suggested Hamilton Global Holdings and its potential partners were engaged in questionable practices. Some lines mentioned bribes to foreign officials. Others indicated accounts in offshore tax havens. Eliza's mind spun. Was this real? Who sent it, and why send it to her? She scrolled further and found references to Nick's involvement. It seemed he might have discovered these shady dealings and was resisting them. If he refused, his father's entire plan for the merger could collapse. Could this be why Nick had stormed out? Was he being blackmailed by his own father to keep quiet, to finalize the merger? Despite potential illegalities, Eliza felt sick. If this information was legitimate, it explained the swirling rumors. Perhaps Charles Hamilton suspected Eliza would blow the whistle given her background in non-profit legal work and her investigative streak. Just as Eliza was about to show Joshua the documents, her phone rang. The caller ID displayed Charles Hamilton III. Anxiety flared in her chest, but she answered. Charles's voice was controlled but cold. Eliza, I'd advise you not to speak to the press. The situation is delicate. We wouldn't want you to misrepresent the family. Eliza's frustration boiled. I haven't said a thing. But maybe you can tell me where Nick is. He paused. Nick is taking time to reconsider his position. That's all you need to know. As for you, I suggest you refrain from meddling in matters that don't concern you. Anger surged. Excuse me, I'm his wife. This concerns me, and I'm carrying his child. Charles's voice took on a menacing edge. And that is precisely why I'm telling you to tread carefully. The Hamilton name carries weight enough to protect or to destroy. Good day, Eliza. The line went dead. Eliza's hands shook. She had never liked or trusted Charles, but to hear him threaten her so openly. She knew now the documents in her inbox were the key to everything. She showed the files to Joshua, who read them with horror etched on his face. If these are real, then Hamilton Global is on the brink of committing massive fraud. This would ruin the company if it became public. Eliza was adamant. We have to find Nick. If he's the one standing against these dealings, he could be in real danger. Joshua dialed Nick's number again. No response. He tried mutual friends, colleagues, but no one had heard from him since the night before. Eliza mulled over her options. She had enough journalistic instinct to know that handing these documents directly to the media would create a firestorm and might endanger Nick if he was somehow caught in the crosshairs. But doing nothing felt like a betrayal of all she believed in. She made a decision. I'm going to contact an investigative journalist I trust, not to publish yet, but to verify if these documents are genuine. Joshua nodded slowly. Okay. We'll need to keep a low profile. The Hamilton family's PR machine will be out for blood if they suspect you're behind this leak. Eliza steeled herself, determination replacing her fear. I won't let them bully me. Not this time. The day wore on. News trucks lined the street below the penthouse, and the media demanded a statement. The speculation grew wilder. Some tabloids claimed Nick fled the country, others that Eliza was working with the FBI. Seeking a semblance of normalcy. Eliza's parents finally arrived, escorted by building security through the back entrance. They embraced her, trying to provide comfort, but the tension was palpable. She made a few calls to her journalist acquaintance, Sarah Blake, an old college friend who now worked for a reputable newspaper. Sarah agreed to meet discreetly at a nearby cafe that evening, away from paparazzi. Despite Joshua's reservations, Eliza slipped into a cab bundled in a coat and scarf, evading the cameras by using an underground parking exit. She clutched a folder containing printouts of the leaked documents, her heart pounding at the risk. At the cafe, Sarah greeted her with a tight hug. I saw the news. Are you okay? Eliza shrugged. Not really, but there's something bigger happening here. I need your help verifying these files. Sarah's eyes widened as Eliza laid out the documents. She listened intently, scribbling notes. This is huge, Eliza. If these are authentic, it implicates not just Hamilton Global, but major international players. You realize what kind of storm this could create? Eliza exhaled. Yes. That's why I need to be sure. My husband is missing. I believe he walked out because he discovered these unethical deals and his father was forcing his hand. Sarah nodded gravely. I'll use my contacts to authenticate them. But once you light this fuse, there's no going back. Are you ready for that? Eliza swallowed hard. I'll do what it takes to protect Nick and to make sure the truth comes out. Back at the penthouse, Sarah's team worked around the clock, verifying codes, cross-checking email headers, contacting industry insiders who might confirm or deny the authenticity of the documents. By the next morning, Sarah sent Eliza a secure message. These are real. We have multiple confirmations. The scandal could break wide open. That same morning, Eliza received a text from an unknown number. Nick is safe. If you want to see him, come to 3445 West 57th St. Parking, Level B, at 11 p.m. Alone. Eliza's heart soared with hope. But fear soon crept in. Was this a trap? She read the text to Joshua. He frowned. That's a secluded parking garage near the old Midtown offices. It could be a setup. But if it really is Nick, Eliza thought of her baby, her love for Nick, and the vow she made to stand by him. "I'm going. I have to." At 10:45 p.m., Eliza discreetly left the penthouse, ignoring reporters clamoring at the front. She called an Uber, instructing the driver to drop her off a block away from the address. Adrenaline coursed through her veins. She arrived at the dimly lit parking garage. The guard at the booth barely looked up from his phone as she entered on foot. Rows of parked cars stretched into the shadows. A tall figure stepped out from behind a concrete pillar. Eliza recognized him in an instant. Nick. She breathed, tears rushing to her eyes. He looked disheveled, dark circles under his eyes, as if he hadn't slept. But he was there, alive, real. They rushed into each other's arms. For a moment, neither spoke, just clung to the other in desperate relief. Finally, Nick pulled back. "Eliza, I'm so sorry. I couldn't stay. I discovered things about the merger. Terrible illegal things. My father expects me to go along with it. When I refused, he threatened me. Threatened us." Eliza blinked back tears. "I know. I've seen the documents. Nick, you should have told me." He sighed. "I didn't want to drag you into this mess, but it looks like it's too late." She held his face in her hands. "We're in this together. Whatever your father is planning, whatever Hamilton Global is doing, it can't continue." Nick nodded, tears glistening in his eyes. "I want to expose them. I want to do the right thing. But I'm afraid of what my father will do to you, to our child." Eliza's voice firmed. "We won't hide. I've already reached out to a journalist. The story is being verified." Nick's eyes widened, a flicker of hope mixed with worry. "If we go public, it could bring down everything. My family's empire, our fortune. We'll be targets." She squeezed his hand. "I don't care about the money. I care about us, and about raising our child without a dark cloud of corruption hanging over our heads." Nick let out a shaky breath, pulling her into another embrace. "Then we do it. Together." The wind howled through Manhattan's canyons like a warning. But inside the quiet offices of the Journal, the storm had already broken. Just before noon, the headline dropped: "Hamilton Global's secret network bribes shell companies and a family divided." The article was front-page top-fold. Sarah Blake's team had verified every line, every document Eliza had brought to her. Nick had provided further testimony, encrypted emails, files, internal communications that traced a web of corruption tied to Hamilton Global Holdings, foreign officials, and multinational banks. The proof was irrefutable, and the world took notice. Within hours, major news outlets picked up the story. Cable networks broke into regular programming. Stock tickers flashed red as Hamilton Global's valuation plunged by billions. Government agencies announced formal investigations. Social media erupted with hashtags like #HamiltonLeak and #LegacyExposed. In their penthouse, Nick and Eliza watched the coverage unfold. The same media that once fawned over them now told a different story, one not of glamour, but of integrity. Nick paced in front of the TV, running a hand through his hair. "It's real now," he murmured. "No going back." Eliza stood and took his hand, grounding him. "That's the point. We don't go back. We go forward." That evening, Anderson Cooper aired a prime-time interview with Nick recorded under tight security. Nick didn't name names, but he confirmed the authenticity of the documents. He described the moral crossroads he had reached, the pressure from his father, the threats, the lies he could no longer abide. His voice shook only once when he said, "I couldn't bring a child into this world while carrying that kind of darkness." Public reaction was immediate and powerful. Some called Nick a traitor to his legacy. Others hailed him as a whistleblower who dared to stand against corruption even when it meant turning on his own blood. But in the quiet corners of their home, as Eliza held his hand and rested her other on her belly, none of that mattered. They had chosen truth, and from that choice, a different kind of legacy was being born. The fallout from the exposé was swift and seismic. Overnight, Hamilton Global Holdings transformed from a symbol of financial prestige to a cautionary tale broadcast on every news outlet in America. The company's stock nosedived. Investors scrambled to distance themselves. Regulators opened investigations not only in the US, but across Europe and the Middle East. Nick's name, once synonymous with wealth and power, now floated through headlines alongside words like whistleblower, betrayal, and courage. The media dubbed it the collapse of the Hamilton dynasty. And still through the whirlwind, Eliza and Nick stood firm. They remained at their penthouse, declining interviews and offers for book deals. Eliza focused on her pregnancy, clinging to moments of calm between the waves of public attention. Her doctor concerned by the stress advised rest and limited media exposure. So Nick turned off the television, closed the laptop, and stayed by her side. "I'm not going to lose what matters most," he told her one night, rubbing gentle circles over her swollen belly. "The company's gone. My father's empire is crumbling. But you, and him, you're what I have now." Eliza reached for his hand. "You didn't lose anything worth keeping. You let go of something rotten. That takes strength." Despite the chaos, they were not entirely alone. Joshua Pierce remained a steady presence, helping Nick manage his remaining assets. While much of Nick's fortune was tangled in Hamilton Global stock, now nearly worthless, he still had enough in independent investments to keep them secure. Public sentiment began to shift. Where once there had been whispers of scandal, now there was respect. Eliza's dignity under pressure, Nick's decision to speak out, it resonated with people. They were no longer seen as symbols of elitism, but as humans who had chosen truth over comfort. And though the road ahead was still uncertain, one thing was clear. They had not only survived the storm, they had changed the weather. They had traded privilege for principle, power for purpose. And for the first time in their lives, they could look at themselves and each other with unwavering honesty. The new year dawned not with fireworks, but with subpoenas. Charles Hamilton III, once the towering patriarch of one of America's most respected financial dynasties, now found himself at the center of a high-stakes congressional investigation. The televised hearings transfixed the nation. It was rare to see a man of his stature questioned so publicly, his carefully constructed empire stripped bare under the scrutiny of lawmakers and regulators. In the Hamilton penthouse, Nick and Eliza watched the hearings unfold from their living room couch, their hands intertwined baby supplies, neatly stacked in the corner in preparation for the weeks ahead. Charles sat stiffly before the committee, his signature silk tie knotted with precision, but the calm confidence that once defined him had thinned into tension. Page after page of financial records and email transcripts were laid before him. Bribes, backdoor partnerships, misappropriated funds. With each revelation, the weight of decades of unchecked power bore down on him. For Nick, it was surreal. The man being interrogated was the same father who had taught him how to ride a bike, how to deliver a firm handshake, how to carry the Hamilton name with pride. But that pride had long since been eroded by secrets and manipulation. Eliza sensed his pain and rested her head on his shoulder. "You're not responsible for his choices," she said gently. "You made your own. That's what makes you different." Later that night, Nick's phone buzzed. "Father, the screen," read. He hesitated, then answered. Charles's voice was subdued, laced with weariness. "You've destroyed everything I built," he said, more exhausted than angry. "No," Nick replied quietly. "You destroyed it the moment you decided your legacy mattered more than your integrity." A long silence followed. Then Charles whispered, "Take care of that child. Be better than I was." The line disconnected. Nick stared at the screen, his reflection barely visible in the darkened glass. Eliza moved closer, wrapping her arms around him. And in that quiet moment, the final thread between father and son fell away, not with rage, but with resignation. The old world was gone, and a new one, however uncertain, had begun. Winter still clung to the city, its snow-crusted sidewalks and steel-grey skies, a stark backdrop for what would become the most transformative day of Eliza and Nick's lives. It began quietly just after dawn. Eliza stirred in bed, a dull cramp spreading through her lower back. At first she thought it was nothing, just another ache in the long stretch of late pregnancy. But minutes later the discomfort returned, sharper this time, and closer together. Her breath caught. She placed a hand on her belly, now round and firm. "Not yet," she whispered. "It's too early." Nick, who had been dozing in a nearby armchair after a late-night phone call with a legal team, jolted awake when she called his name. "The baby's coming," she said, voice shaking but steady. Within minutes they were racing through Manhattan in a black SUV, sirens in the distance, and headlights slicing through the misty morning. The world outside felt like it was holding its breath. For Nick, every red light felt like an eternity. For Eliza, time blurred as pain and anticipation mingled in waves. They arrived at the hospital just after sunrise. The nurses acted quickly, guiding Eliza through intake as Nick clutched her hand, whispering encouragement between clenched jaws. Labor was swift, too swift. The baby was coming a month early, and there was no time to prepare mentally or emotionally. It was raw and real. Eliza pushed through the fear, her thoughts fixed on the tiny life inside her. And then he arrived. Their son. Small, pink, wailing with strength that belied his early arrival. Nick's hands trembled as he cut the cord. Eliza sobbed quietly, not from pain, but from relief, from joy, from sheer disbelief that after everything, the scandal, the fear, the collapse of everything familiar, they had this. "He's perfect," Nick whispered, holding the baby to his chest. They named him Oliver, a symbol of peace, of hope, of a future rebuilt. In that moment, the cameras, the headlines, the weight of legacy, it all vanished. There was only this tiny child and two people who had fought like hell to give him a better world. And in that sterile hospital room, love reigned quietly, but completely. The months after the exposé were a blur of transition. What once defined Nick and Eliza's lives, boardrooms, fundraisers, headlines now felt like relics of a world they had left behind. The Hamilton name no longer graced the covers of financial magazines as a symbol of power, but it was still present, whispered now in conversations about justice, courage, and corporate accountability. Charles Hamilton III, once untouchable, stepped down from the board of Hamilton Global Holdings, The company entered a grueling period of restructuring overseen by federal investigators and new leadership appointed by court mandate. Several of Charles's closest associates faced indictments, and although he avoided prison time by cooperating and paying substantial fines, his reputation was shattered. Nick, newly divorced from the Hamilton empire, chose not to fight for his stake in the company. "Let them rebuild it without me," he told Eliza. "I want our future built on something real." And so they redirected their energy into something entirely new. With Eliza's background in non-profit legal work and Nick's connections and insight into business, the couple launched an organization focused on ethical entrepreneurship. They called it Clear Path, a foundation committed to promoting transparency, integrity, and accountability in business. Rather than chasing profit, their mission was to elevate the stories of whistleblowers, reform corporate culture, and empower future leaders to do better. Eliza also revived her long-held dream of investigative journalism. Through a podcast titled Inside the Veil, she interviewed corporate insiders, lawyers, and activists about corruption and reform. Her calm, empathetic interviewing style, paired with Nick's honest reflections, quickly built a dedicated audience. Though the Hamilton name no longer held its elite shine, it found something more valuable: respect from communities that valued truth over titles. Nick and Eliza embraced a quieter life, selling off the opulent trappings of their past. The penthouse felt warmer now, not as a monument to wealth, but as a home where love, laughter, and the cries of baby Oliver echoed off the marble walls. They had weathered the storm, and now, beneath calmer skies, they were building something greater than legacy, something rooted in honesty, compassion, and each other. The first day of spring bathed Manhattan in golden light. After a long, relentless winter, both literal and emotional, Eliza finally felt the warmth return. On their balcony, overlooking the soft green of Central Park, Nick sat cradling their baby son Oliver against his chest. The boy slept peacefully, his tiny breaths syncing with the rhythm of his father's heartbeat. Eliza stepped outside quietly, her bare feet padding across the cool stone. She paused to take in the view. Her husband no longer the glossy heir to a billion-dollar empire, but something much more real, grounded human. She sat beside him, the city stretching before them like a promise. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked softly, her voice barely louder than the rustling leaves. "Blowing it all up. The company. The name." Nick didn't answer right away. He looked down at Oliver, then out toward the skyline he used to own. "I regret the way it happened," he said finally. "The pain it caused. The silence between us when I should have talked to you. But I don't regret doing the right thing. I needed to choose our future over my father's legacy." Eliza nodded, emotion swelling in her throat. "You chose truth over power," she whispered. "And somehow, through all of it, we still found each other." Nick turned to her, his eyes glinting in the morning light. "You gave me a reason to be brave," he said. "You and him." Oliver stirred, letting out a soft sigh. Eliza smiled and leaned into Nick's shoulder, wrapping an arm around both of them. Together they sat in a silence filled with meaning, the kind of silence that comes only after weathering a storm. They had lost nearly everything society once said mattered. But here in the heart of the city, with a baby in their arms and sunlight on their faces, they knew they had gained something far more enduring, an unbreakable bond. And that was everything. Thank you for joining us on this roller coaster journey through betrayal, scandal, and redemption. Nicholas Hamilton's decision to walk away on Christmas Eve set off a chain reaction that not only tore down a corrupted dynasty, but also brought an unwavering love into sharper focus. In the end, courage and truth won out, proof that even in a world where wealth and power often overshadow morality, integrity can light the way. If you found this story compelling and want to be part of our growing community, please like this video, share it with friends who love a good drama, and subscribe for more tales that explore the resilience of the human spirit. Your support keeps the conversation alive and helps us bring you even more thought-provoking stories. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next chapter of real-life drama.